What is up? Jacob here with another video with tips and tricks to help you record better, mix better, and work better. Today we're going to be talking about phase, and more specifically phase correlation and phase cancellation. Let's jump in. So to begin, I'm going to give you guys the vanilla description of what phase is, straight out of a dictionary. This comes from the Oxford English Dictionary. Phase is the relationship in time between successive states or cycles of an oscillating or repeating system, such as an alternating electric current or light or sound wave, and either a fixed reference point or the states or cycles of another system which it may or may not be in synchrony. So there's a lot to unpack there. A little bit of a complicated description. I'm gonna give you guys my personal description of what phase is. And before we jump into that, we have to ask ourselves, what is sound? What is music? Sound is vibrations. And more specifically, in our case, more practical sense, it's the push and pull of a speaker in our monitors, in our phones, in our headphones. The push and pull of the speaker cone is what creates vibration, which we hear and interpret as music or sound. More technically speaking, music or sound is the rotation of amplitude from point A to point B, or 0 degrees to 360 degrees. Typically, a wave or sound will go through a whole cycle from 0 degrees up into positive amplitude, back to the 0 point, down into negative amplitude, and then back to the 0 point at 360 degrees. And that length depicts the frequency of the sound, whether it's a low frequency or a high frequency. And in that positive and negative amplitude, that is what's going to be pushing and pulling our speaker to create the vibrations that we hear with our ears. Now, when I'm talking about phase cancellation or phase correlation, I'm talking about the relationship between two different sources and their amplitude or their phase rotation. Let me give you guys an example. I have this session open here with a bass track. And now I've taken this main bass track, I'll mute the duplicate for now, this main bass track here. Sounds great, normal bass. I've created a duplicate of that track, exactly the same thing, duplicated it. And let's see what it sounds like now with both together. Now, because it's exactly a duplicate of the same signal, both together with their phase relationship, it's twice the loudness. It's just the same signal louder. Now watch what happens when I take that duplicate track and flip the phase or reverse the polarity. It's gone. It disappears. And that's because the phase rotation has now been reversed on the duplicate track. So what was the positive amplitude and negative amplitude of the original source has been duplicated and flipped. So now the positive amplitude of the original is being canceled out by the negative amplitude of the duplicate. And that's what we call phase cancellation. In this case, it's perfect phase cancellation because it's the exact same signal. Now let me give you another example. In this case, it's the same bass track, but when I recorded this, I recorded a bass direct and a bass amp. And the phase correlation is actually pretty good between those two things. There's always a little bit of a delay, but usually it's fairly tight. Now let's listen to it normally. Great, sounds fantastic. Let's now flip the phase on the amp track. Doesn't sound nearly as good, right? Not as much low end. That's something you'll typically hear when things are canceling each other's phases. You'll lose a little bit of low end definition, a lot less volume as well. And to give you a visual look, let me open this master meter here. Look at the level with the amp out of phase. We're peaking at about minus 16 dB, right? Let me flip it back into phase now. Now we're peaking at about minus 10 dB, which is a pretty huge difference. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about phase correlation and phase cancellation, right? When I flip the phase in the amp, there's some phase cancellation happening and we're losing a little bit of that low end. And when we're in phase, not flipped, we get that low end back. And that's why it's so important when you're recording one source with multiple inputs, for example, a bass DI and an amp, or a drum kit, you have two overheads and a kick drum microphone. It's important to check the phase relationship between all those microphones to make sure that your speaker is not getting pushed by one signal and pulled from another, resulting in your phase cancellation. And just to give you a little bit more of a visual representation, if you look at the waves of this bass DI and bass amp track, if I zoom in, you're gonna see that my positive and negative amplitudes are lining up fairly well. Now the signal is a bit different because of the saturation from the amp or the saturation from the DI. It's not the perfect amplitude wave that you're used to seeing, but you can see that the phase correlation between these two sources are actually really good. Now if I were to flip the bass track, here I've reversed the polarity of the bass amp, and you can see that at some points, there is some cancellation of phase between the positive and negative amplitude of both tracks. And to reiterate this, what's happening is one signal is pushing the cone of your speaker out and one signal is pulling it back in, resulting in the cancellation that we're hearing. And so that's it. That's my quick definition of what phase is and what phase cancellation and what phase correlation is. Before I let you go, I want to ask two things of you. First thing, I want you to leave me a comment on this video and let me know what are your techniques to check your phase relationships between your instruments while recording and mixing. And second thing, I want to tell you about something very special. I've written up an ebook covering the 5 main principles on becoming a recording studio ninja. That ebook is absolutely free. I want you to go pick it up. It's at my website, www.mixwithjacob.com/ninja. Again, it's absolutely free. I want you to go pick that up right now. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share this video with friends who might find it helpful. And once again, thank you for watching. I will see you next time.